I appreciate your patience. Rod, thank you for firing off 20 memberships to the chat while we waited. I've got Jim here. He has basically graced us with his time because this guy's busy. He was at the press conference before he jumped on our show to give us some insight, and I'm glad that we have somebody here who has more knowledge about Indiana than I do. He's the host of Indiana Sports Beat Radio. He is the publisher for the Hoosier.com. I actually just reached out to him on Twitter last week. He said he would come on and help us out with some, notes for the game on Saturday. So I'm excited to bring him in. Let's see. We've got my screen share. Jim, how we doing?
Pretty good, man. How are you doing, Connor?
It's a really good week when Nebraska gets a chance to upset a top 25 team on the road. And although they are the dog, I'm excited to take the points. And I'm excited to hear what you think about this one, especially because I heard some, or at least I read some notes from the press conference with Curt Cignetti tonight. And I want to know what your thoughts were on what he had to say and what his energy is going into this weekend.
He's the same way every week, every game. It doesn't matter who they're playing. And I know that sounds cliche, but it's not. He is geared for a one game at a time mentality, but he also knows a big game. He knows that this is a big game. He knows that Fox noon kickoff, big noon kickoff is in town. I mean, that stuff is not lost upon him. So there's magnitude here. But his job is to manage that, not only for himself, his staff, his players. And if he doesn't do it, then they won't do it. And he does a pretty damn good job of it. But they've maintained this businessman's attitude all year. Going to work this week, it's a business trip. If we're going on the road, it's a business trip. They've got a great singular focus. And it's worked pretty well so far.
This is a big weekend for recruiting, obviously, when you've got a team like Nebraska coming in, best team they've played so far. Like you mentioned, big new kickoffs in town. I know that Indiana's in year one of their rebuild. We'll call it a rebuild, even though it feels like they're ready to win today, right? They went to the transfer portal hard.
They are winning today.
Yeah, they're 6-0. Good start. So they went to the portal hard. But do you think that this is going to be a portal-based team? Do you think he's going to go and take the Matt Rule approach and really hone in on high school? What's the recruiting going forward, and how important is it this week? And I don't know who's in town or what players they're targeting, but I do remember seeing that they were going after some pretty highly rated guys in the high school ranks.
Absolutely. I think it's just going to be a combination because this is what football has become. It's going to be a combination of those. There might be some teams that live in the portal, like Colorado, who will probably do that year after year, but you cannot have continuity if that is the entire basis of your program. I just don't believe that. First of all, and then secondly, how the hell can you build culture when you have to resell it and reteach it year after year after year? You don't have, if that's the case, you don't have, the players are the ones that are supposed to manifest that culture and send it down the line. And so, yeah, it's got to be a mix, but the portal is always going to be a major part because for two reasons. It works both ways. If you need a certain thing, it's like going to, your favorite store, you go down aisle 6 and pick up what you need. But also, these other players, they may be in a situation that they need out, or this works better for them, and who knows. But it's a two-way street. But I will say that I'm loving it. I started to say I hate with all the change, but college football has become this unique animal that is amazing. Oh gosh darn it, what's the word I'm looking for?
Well, it's more exciting than ever, and I think that's the key thing. You have so much change and so many teams who are now actually competing. Like Indiana over the past, whatever it's been, 3-4 years, has just gone completely dormant after DeBoer left and Penix transferred out. And now they're rising up, and it's like, wow, Indiana out of nowhere is competing and looks like a potential playoff team at the rate they're going.
Yeah, and this is mainly because of Curt Cignetti. They have made, well, and Nebraska fans are not, this is not new to them. When you don't make the right hires, even though they might seem like the right hires, it doesn't work. Indiana had their Scott Frost. His name was Cam Cameron. He played basketball and football at Indiana. He was and has been a successful offensive coordinator. Boy, he sucked as a head coach in Indiana. They had Sam Whites, they had Jerry DiNardo. It just but this time I knew immediately there was something different about all of this. There was something different about him, about how he carried himself. It wasn't you had to get past the brash cockiness because he set the tone in day one of the opening press conference. And then we slowly started to see him. All right, now I've made my presence known. He's calculated in everything he does.
Was day one when they talked about recruiting, he said, I win, Google me. That was pretty strong.
Yep.
It was a strong opener, and it was like, wow, IU is back. And we don't even know anything about him yet.
It was crazy. I mean, who says that?
Yeah, no, that was ballsy.
I mean, who says that? I mean, Nick Saban doesn't say that. Who says that? Lane Kiffin doesn't say that.
Right. No, he's fiery, and I loved it. Okay, so let's now, switching from the coaches, let's talk about the fan base. The culture at IU extends further than just the football team, right? So I was watching that IU game against, must have been Maryland. It was a home game a few weeks ago, and the stadium, it didn't look that full to me. And I was like, man, for an undefeated team who's coming off a win over UCLA, started hot 3-0 or whatever they were at the time, it didn't feel like the energy had shifted. So at what point did the fans come in? Because right now I can feel the Indiana fans. I know that they care. You obviously saw that they sold out their stadium. I know Will Compton like to say that that's Nebraska's doing, but I like to believe Indiana fans actually do care about this team when they win. At what point did the energy shift from fans not fully buying in to now where they believe that this team's actually ranked in the top 20?
It had started with that Maryland game. That was a terrible, crappy weather day. It rained. It was awful. But they still had, I think, the biggest crowd of the year. That I think like 48,000 or something. But anyway, it would have been bigger because they had a lot of walk-ups. So a lot of people ended up staying outside that didn't have tickets, whatnot. Anyway, it is just continuing to build. People are the IU fan base. They don't have a traditional fan base. I mean, Nebraska, man, they've sold out their stadium for 400 and times now, or however many times. That's tradition. That's Indiana basketball. Even when Indiana basketball has sucked, and man, it has not been fun for almost 25 years, Assembly Hall still filled. They are a sleeping giant. I see Nebraska football as the same thing, sleeping giant. But a sleeping giant that can still work in this environment of today's college athletics. But to answer your question, it's been building. People want to believe. I mean, they really want to believe it's true. But first of all, who the hell can believe that Indiana is 6-0 and not just getting lucky and winning games? They're kicking the crap out of anybody that comes near them.
Yeah.
And it's been unbelievably fun to watch. I long before the season started, I started talking about the path to 6-0 because I'm like, this is a 6-0 start for Indiana, and got maybe a little lucky on it. Who knows?
But I wouldn't call it lucky. I think they've just had a favorable schedule. We'll put it that way.
Yeah, and they have it for once in Indiana's program, because first of all, they're so used to playing in the Big Ten East, when routinely year in, year out, you've got one of the toughest schedules in America. And so you could just never breathe. And then if you ended up playing a Nebraska or Iowa or something from the West, then it's like, wow. But this schedule is laid out perfect. The teams, the way that they happen to fall this year, the home games, everything rises each week. Now, Nebraska and Washington, I don't know who's better than each other right there. That's going to be an interesting if they get to play. But Michigan State's a drop off. But then you play Michigan, and I think Indiana wins that game. But doesn't matter. Michigan's a tough team, a tough out.
Yeah, it's definitely a tough schedule. But before the season, Vegas had lower expectations. Obviously, they thought.
Oh, everybody did.
Yeah, they thought 5.5 wins, which was fair. I felt like this was kind of a borderline 6-win team. But now They're sitting at a projection of 11-1, at least by the FBI or the FPI model with ESPN. So I want to know what your read was over the offseason. Did you feel like this was a team who was going to go over on that 5.5 number? Or did you think this was a team who was still going to be in a rebuild mode with that first year head coach? And I really want to know, are you surprised that they're undefeated at this point? Or was, like you said, you knew right when Cignetti got there, he set the tone and it felt like, this is a team who's going to come out and they're going to compete to win this season?
Well, first of all, uh, I'm not now, but if you would have told me 6 weeks, 2 months before the season that this team would be 6-0, I'd have said, you're out of your damn mind, probably.
Yeah.
But before we got to the season, as we started to get closer, like I said, it was kind of a palpable thing for me. And being around, the more you were around Cignetti and you learn to navigate that channel he throws out, then you could see. But then you also start thinking about the fact that his staff, both of his coordinators have been with him for 9 and 10 years, not as coordinators, but with him. That is unbelievable continuity. Tino Sunseri, the quarterback's coach, been with him for 6 seasons. And so that says a lot. Great continuity. And we didn't know how the JMU players would translate, or any of the mid-major guys that came in. Boy, you want to talk about translation. Nothing's getting lost in that translation.
Well, on that note, let's jump to Curtis Rourke because he's a mid-major guy. He transferred in after a really strong career in the MAC. His TD to interception ratio is 14-2. So do you think he's benefiting from a really strong receiving core? Has the schedule been favorable and we haven't really seen him go up against a vaunted Big Ten defense yet? Or is that experience that he brought over just translating well and he's actually maybe an NFL quarterback?
I think that his maturity is a gigantic thing for him and this team. He's married. He got married right before the season. And so again, I'm like, wow, the guy's getting married in college. So he's got maturity about him. And that's what Kurt Cignetti likes about him. And he is calm. He does not, he's unflappable. He is a, I hate to use the word business-like again, but man, he takes a businessman's approach. He doesn't make many mistakes at all. The offensive line has surprisingly been very good this year. They've given up 1 sack per game, and that has helped. He has a plethora of great wide receivers and receivers, period, to throw the ball to that he can count on, and they count on him, and a good stable of running backs. So this offense is just been very multi-dimensional and multifaceted, but he is the calming force, the eye of the hurricane. And this offense is a hurricane.
Well, moving on to the other guys in the offense then. Let's talk about Ellison and Lawton. So you got 2 running backs. I think that Ellison had 80 more yards than Lawton does, but they split the carries. So do you think these guys are more similar backs or they have different skill sets? I wanted to know, are they situational players and they get rotated in, or is this just both of them are studs and they get used frequently?
They're both very similar runners. It's just, again, you have this great stable of backs that you can run in, and you just mentioned the top 3, but I do think that maybe Green probably brings a little more power, maybe. But
I forgot to mention Kalen Black. What about him? He was the starter at
yeah.
JMU last year.
Yeah, that's another guy. It's actually who I think is probably brings a little more power, maybe. But the fact that you've got 4 different guys that are pretty similar is it's a luxury. Not just from the depth standpoint, but the creativity standpoint. Each guy is going to do his own thing, though. They may be similar in styles and whatnot, but they all read the way they read. They all cut how they cut. And so I think that's part of what makes this team so good is there are so many differences.
That makes sense. Well, I've got another one popped up right here that just came to mind because Not I Said the Fly, thank you for being a member, said that he foresees 6 to 7 sacks for Nebraska. Now, sounds like a lot, especially given the fact that IU doesn't give up that many sacks. Now, as you know, Nebraska fans love their pass rushers and the down linemen they have right now. And they've been pretty good in every single game this year. You could argue Illinois was their worst performance. I guess couldn't even argue it. That was their worst performance. What's the strength on IU's line, and how do you think they match up with Nebraska's front?
Well, I'll be honest with you. I'm probably most surprised by the performance of Indiana's offensive line. They didn't seem to, like, we knew they were bringing in talent and these receivers and these running backs, and you could tell where the talent was. But as far as the offensive line goes, they lost a starter before the season started
I
for the
forgot
year.
about that. They lost. Yeah, what position was he?
Nick Kidwell, right tackle, I think, or right guard. I can't
And
remember
they've
which.
still
But
been
so
solid.
they lose a starter before the season starts, and I'm like, oh God, boy. And they they deserve so much credit because this is an offensive line that was the bane of Indiana's existence just a few years ago. Not under Bob Bostad, but the previous regime. And for this to be, they allow Curtis Rourke to not feel that pressure and not make a lot of those mistakes. Open those holes. Now Indiana's not the top running team in the country, but hey, they're fourth in the Big Ten, man. Uh, they're got it's a top 10 offense, top 10 defense. So and again, I think it's just because of the multi dimensions, but the passing game is just so hard for defenses to cover because there are so many options.
I think this weekend, Nebraska's going to give them a little bit more trouble than they've seen so far.
Well, I absolutely expect that.
William says, or he asks, why did Northwestern hang with IU for so long? And I think that a lot of people looked at that score, even if they weren't watching the game, and they saw it was pretty tight up until the very end when Indiana pulled away. What do you think the reason Northwestern was able to hang in there?
Why did Alabama lose to Vanderbilt? Why did Georgia beat Ole Miss in Oxford, Mississippi, and then turn around and lose to Vanderbilt at home? Trust me, when you're winning and you're playing conference games, they're going to be tough. Why
Well,
did
well,
Illinois give up
let's
40 second half points to
That's fair.
Purdue?
That's fair. But let's go more specific. Like what did you see in that game that was cause for concern? Because Nebraska has to have somewhere they can exploit a weakness. We know what Nebraska's weaknesses are, right? Like Nebraska
It
has
was
a few.
the passing. Ironically, their Northwestern's quarterback, Jack Lausch, had sucked in his last outing against Washington. He was
Okay.
like 8 of 27 for 57 yards or something terrible. Against Indiana, he was like 22 of 33 for 243 yards. That's, to me, that's too many yards to give up to that guy.
Yeah.
You cannot give up to that team. You can't give up those kind of yards to that guy. But the next week, he goes down to Maryland and kicks the ever-loving crap out of Maryland.
Yep.
So he's just gotten better as they've gone along. They had a bye before they played Indiana. That helped him immensely. That helped them immensely prepare for Indiana. So a lot goes into it. But at the end of the day, it's still a double-digit win and on the road in the Big Ten, and you're going to take that all day.
Yeah, no, there was no red flag by the end of it. By the end, it was like, all right, Indiana's who we expected them to be. They covered the spread. Good teams win. Great teams cover, obviously. I think IU's covered every game they've played so far this year. Been a
They
great
have,
team to,
and that's
great team to
another
bet on.
thing though. They are such a strong second half team. They've scored 80 points. And Matt Rule said in his presser, they've scored 80 points in the fourth quarter. They just don't stop. It just keeps coming at you. And that's the problem that defenses face.
Yep.
They start wearing down, and this team, they're still coming at you.
Yep. Okay, well, let's talk about guys that can come at him. So you've got Surratt, who's the top weapon. Then you've got three others who are all pretty similar in terms of targets. I think they all have like 17, 19, and 20 catches, if I remember correctly. But who's the biggest threat after the catch in that receiver room?
Man, Surratt has done a great job. Miles Cross has done a great job, and Miles Cross has a great relationship with Curtis Rourke because they both came over from Ohio together. So I would say one of those two guys.
Yeah, is there anybody who's a big body, or is it Surratt who's probably the biggest body? He's like 6'1",
Omar
6'2".
Cooper is pretty good, and he's second in receiving yards with 375. He's a big dude, man. He's like I think 6'3" or 4.
Okay, so he's pretty studly. Well, there's a comment that popped up here, and I've seen this comment actually pop up on my channel this week. It says they don't have the depth that Nebraska does. And at first glance, you would assume, well, of course they don't have the depth because they built through the transfer portal, it's a new coach and all that. But everywhere I've looked, they've got the depth. They have 4 running backs who could start. They have a group of 5 receivers who are all studs. I don't know what their QB situation
actually,
is.
there's probably 8 guys that have 6 or more catches.
Yeah, so they go deep. So what is it when people say that they don't have the depth? Is it the line? Is it the defense? Where do they lack depth? Because their whole team can't be an elite team. I wouldn't think this early on.
Well, first of all, it's a perception because Indiana never has depth, and that's just true. That is truth. But they don't have a lot of depth in the offensive line. That's a like I said, that could be an issue. They've already lost a starter, so they don't have a lot of depth there.
Yeah.
But they've been fortunate. They've stayed healthy. That's been an unbelievable plus for this team. They have to stay healthy. There are certain areas where they would not be as affected as much, but offensive line, not one of those. I think the secondary, I think that they could probably use a little bit more depth there. Other than that, they're pretty strong. I mean, but as long as you don't get hurt, you don't need depth.
That's true.
Because
they haven't gotten hurt yet. They haven't gotten hurt yet, so you don't know enough about the depth yet because they haven't had to play them yet. That's kind of the key there, right? Who's outside of just the lineman who went down before the season? Has anybody else gone down, or all their starters have been intact?
I mean, they've had guys getting nicked up and whatnot, but I think that everyone is healthy and playing now. I think they're at full strength.
Okay, so yeah, I mean, I think Nebraska's going to be at full strength. I'm hoping as long as Tommy Hill comes back, we'll see. I'd love to see a healthy Nebraska and a healthy IU. You get 2 teams who are obviously really evenly matched talent-wise. I think Nebraska's got a little bit more size and speed, but not by much. I mean, Indiana's pretty damn good. I've got a super chat here from Bond Sin. Thank you for the $2 super chat. He says, huge game for Nebraska coming up, GBR. And then Rod, thank you for being a member. Thank you for the 2043. He says, if we can keep IU under 30 points and under 200 passing, Nebraska rolls. And what's your thought?
I would agree with that. But
Nebraska? It's Nebraska's defense not letting this game get out of hand and have IU put up 40 like they have the last few weeks, right? That's got to be Nebraska's number one to hold on.
I don't think Indiana scores 40 in this game, but I still think they score in the upper 30s. It's just I know and respect that Nebraska has a really good defensive front, really good. But Indiana's coaching staff is very smart. They also know where their weaknesses are, so they will devise a game plan to mitigate that as much as possible. But if you can keep Indiana under 30 points and under 200 yards passing, buddy, you deserve what you get. And cheers to you. But good luck with that. Yeah. I don't see it happening personally, but
I mean, they weren't able to do it against Illinois, right? Illinois was able to really come after Nebraska, and I would argue that from a skill perspective, at least, I mean, even quarterback, I think Indiana has the edge on offense over Illinois, and I think that's what scares me the most about Indiana.
Well, Indiana has the edge on about everybody. Curtis Rourke is the most efficient quarterback in the NCAA. And that's in front of Dylan Gabriel, in front of any name that you want to throw out there. He is number one as far as efficiency. He's number one in the Big Ten. He's thrown more touchdowns in the Big Ten. Indiana also has more rushing touchdowns than anybody in the Big Ten. Rushing is fourth, passing is first. I noticed that Nebraska is like 9th or 10th in both of those. So I don't think that Nebraska has the offense to win this game. Yeah. It's not the defense. They just don't have the offense. Indiana's defense ain't too bad. While Nebraska's sitting there at number 7, Indiana's at number 11. So they're not giving up any points either. Not that Nebraska won't score. Of course they will. They're that daggone Dylan Raiola, he's a talent, man. They're going to be glad to have him for the next 3 years. He is going to be something. And because he already is, you can see the talent
Yeah.
in him. He's just a freshman, and they're going to make some mistakes here and there. But good Lord, I'm not looking forward to seeing how he plays next year
Yeah, I mean, even in this game, he's going to be the X
or
factor for
by the end of the
Nebraska.
season.
Because, like you said, it's got to be Nebraska's offense who keeps them in this game. Because we know what the defense is going to do, and I mean, I think they're going to hold IU to 30 points. You think they might go a little over that? Nebraska's got to be able to score. In these past few weeks, they haven't been able to be consistent on offense, and for that reason, Nebraska's had to sweat it out. Been frustrating to watch. And now they're playing an even better defense than what they've seen these last couple of weeks. In my opinion, Rutgers is kind of an average defense from what I've seen so far, and they didn't look
They
any better
kind
when
of
they
fell
played
off
Nebraska.
for some reason, it seems like.
Yeah, I don't think they have the talent that they did before. They lost some guys to the NFL. It's just not the same Rutgers team. But regardless, I saw something that said Indiana hasn't trailed all season. Nebraska's only
Only
trailed.
team in the country.
Yep, and Nebraska's only trailed for 15 minutes all season. So obviously, we've talked about Nebraska being the best team they've had to play. Now you've got a huge environment, and most importantly, they've got a target on their back, which they haven't really had, at least this season. However, James Madison has, and Cignetti's not a stranger to big games, like you said at the beginning of this show. So, how do you think this team's going to handle the pressure? Big noon in town, Nebraska coming in, expecting to beat them, and needing Nebraska needs this win just as bad as IU does. So, how do they handle it,
Absolutely.
and does that impact this game at all?
That's one of the things this team has done so well this year is handle success. And Cignetti has talked about that. You have to handle success and stay humble and hungry. And they've managed to do that partly because they're a week to week team. They just gear up each week and for whoever's in front of them, whatever the schedule may be, and they've done an excellent job at that. But geez, what did you originally ask me? I forgot.
I'm
I
just
got
asking
talking.
how you think they're going to handle the pressure, knowing that
Oh yeah,
Nebraska's going to come in, and that's a target now. This is like Nebraska's national
they have
championship.
they have the confidence. They have the chip on their shoulder, and that's what Cignetti wants his team to have. They they are they are a product of their coach. You see Kurt Cignetti with a chip on his shoulder. Part of it's purposeful. Part of it's bravado. Part of it's truth. If you could do it, it ain't bragging. And so it's not really bragging. But anyway, they have that chip on their shoulder. They expect to win.
Yep.
They don't hope to win. They're planning on winning. They plan to go out to UCLA and destroy them like that. They planned on doing everything they do. They respect Nebraska. They know that they're a good, solid team. They're 5-1 in the Big Ten, but I promise you, they fully expect to do to Nebraska what they've done to everybody else.
Yeah, they don't lack confidence, which is something that Nebraska has lacked, it feels like. And the reason Nebraska's dropped so many close games in the past, which hopefully after last week and maybe the Purdue game, they're starting to get over that. I've got a follow up here from Rhymes with Laughter. Thank you for being a member. Thank you for the $5 super chat. He says, for Jim, Indiana has led all year. How do you think they would respond to playing from behind? Came from Connor, stayed for Jim. Comment for the algorithm. Thank you. Laughter. Appreciate you.
That's a great question. I mean, that is truly a great question. Uh, and I wonder if Cignetti would like to see that at some point, because you'd probably rather see it and deal with it than have it come at you at a very inopportune time. And but I think that this team again is just one that handles business. I don't know if I can say it any better than those two words. They handle business, and if it was from behind, it doesn't matter if they're leading 30-0 at the half. It's 0-0, and they're going to come out for those other two quarters and play like it's 0-0 and try to put 30 more points up. And I think that if they were behind, they would just do what they've done all year and just play ball.
Yeah, I don't think that they're a team who's going to struggle to play from behind because they have that strong passing game in the offense. Whereas a team like Rutgers or Wisconsin, other teams of the past who run those traditional Big Ten offenses, they struggle if they don't take a lead early. So I wouldn't be too worried as an IU fan about that. There was a question in here that was a follow up. Oh, Michael says they have a sellout this Saturday. How many Nebraska fans are expected?
I couldn't tell you that, but I will say that probably not as many as you think. Uh, I had heard that they had only requested 1,500 tickets, but I also think that it's going to be a lot. There's a lot more Indiana fans than people think because they were waiting. This like I said, I knew that these last four home games they're going to sell them out. I'm like going, you think you're not going to sell Nebraska out? You think you're not going to sell Washington out and Michigan and Purdue, their rival? So it was just a foregone conclusion, especially after you could feel the Maryland game, the fans, the energy, that there was a change. You asked about it earlier. It was a definitive change there. I think if it hadn't been for the weather, you would have really seen it. But yeah, it's just going to be a blast of an environment. You've got Fox Noon kickoff, so they're going to have the students down there in that mosh pit or whatever. So it's going to be a blast, and the weather's going to be pretty damn good.
What's the weather looking like?
It's going to be like a high of 71, so it'll be nippy up until kickoff, especially for you Central Time Zone guys. 11 a.m. kickoff.
Yeah, maybe that's an edge Indiana has. That's an early kickoff. Okay, here's one from Nick. Thank you for being a member. He says Dylan. So this is a stat that's been going around. I don't know who put it out. I saw it on Twitter. It said that Dylan.
Someone brought this
Yeah.
up to me tonight at the radio show.
Okay, and what's your thought here? Because my opinion is that doesn't matter. IU's just going to adjust, and they're not going to play as much zone. They're going to play more man. That's my take.
Well, he only has a 66% completion rate for the season, so he needs to play against a lot more zone. But I don't think that Indiana is going to let that stat dictate what they do. Now, if they think that they need to cover in man, they'll cover in man. But I don't know that how much they will alter their defensive coverage for Dylan Raiola himself. Like I said, I think he's a talent, but they're 10th in the league in passing. They're not they're not like lighting the world on fire there. So
Yeah, no, they have not been consistent in the last few games, and I think that's what drops them down. Nebraska fans got really excited and hyped up these first few weeks when they were playing worse teams. A similar schedule to what Indiana's played, if we're being honest. And now that Nebraska's played some tougher competition and those numbers have dropped, yeah, I think you're right. Indiana isn't going to adjust the way they do things fully, but I do think they're going to test them. I would not be surprised to see them go more man to man. However, I think there's a size advantage for Nebraska. I think I saw something that said Nebraska's receivers are 6'3", 6'4", and Indiana's DBs are smaller than 6 foot.
Yeah, I do. Again, Indiana's secondary is probably, I think, their weakest link on defense for sure. And probably the weakest link on the team if you had to pick one.
Yeah.
And so that's an area that if Nebraska could be successful in, that would be a way to do it. But Indiana's been really good against the run. They've done a good job of putting some pressure on the quarterback. I don't know how well they'll be able to do that against Nebraska, because I know Nebraska's got some big old beef eaters, man. So that may be an advantage to giving him a clean pocket. So that's what's going to make this game. That's the thing that can make this game close. That's the only, in my opinion, that's the only thing that can make it close. I don't think that Nebraska is going to run on Indiana, but if they could get their passing game going,
Yep.
Hey man, things happen.
That's what I'm watching for right now. Well, Sarah, thank you for being a member. Thank you for the $2 super chat. She says, will the PA, the play action, kill us like it did with Illinois? So do they run a lot of play action or RPO? Do they do some things to confuse you? Or are they just straight drop back spread offense, pass it around, and there's no confusion for a defense? It's just, we're better than you, and we're going to beat you with our receivers.
They're going to do everything. That's again, this offense is fun to watch. Especially, I know that Indiana fans enjoy watching it, but it is such a multi-dimensional offense and Curtis Rourke is the perfect guy to run it because of his maturity and decision-making. And that has been huge for this team.
Yeah, he's been around for a while. And so because he's so experienced, it's hard to get him flustered. Here's a question about Rourke. Evanception, thank you for being a member for 2 years. Thank you for the $5 super chat. He says, has Rourke faced any significant pass rush at all this season? If so, how did he handle it? Great conversation, GBR.
No, not. I mean, he was sacked a couple of times in. I think it may have been the Maryland game. They may have given. They, like I said, they've only given up 1 sack per game, so he's been kept pretty clean. But I've seen him get out of the pocket and run and use his legs if he has to. It's not his. That's not his milieu. It's not where he's going to make his bones. But he'll get in there mixing up if he has to.
I've got a comment from Mr. Fedoni. He said they're great at using their tight ends. I didn't look at IU's tight ends because I was so focused on their receivers. Does their tight end factor as one of their top weapons?
That is a mark of the Cignetti offense. And I remember last year when I was doing some research on actually some of the players, it dawned on me. I started looking at touchdowns. The top 2 running backs that came to Indiana from James Madison combined for is either 6 or 7 touchdowns. I think it was 6. The tight end alone had 6 touchdowns. So wow. I'm like, man, I said, well, he certainly doesn't mind using the tight end.
Yeah, they're a staple in that offense. Okay, getting over to the defense. IU ranked 6th nationally. I think we mentioned that. The best QB they saw, I think, was Jack Lausch, but I don't think he comes close to Raiola when Raiola's at his best. So how do you think that this D matches up when Raiola gets hot? Like, do they drop back into coverage? What's the game plan? Because you saw it in Northwestern a little bit. Are they adjusting, giving up rush yards once they drop back into coverage? Because we need to think of what Nebraska possibly could do to beat this IU team. And I'm looking for your answer at Nebraska's game plan and strategy to win.
Indiana has to get pressure on Raiola without question. You cannot let him sit back there and throw the ball all day long because any secondary will get tired or get beat at some point. It's just a matter of, it's not if, but when. Especially if you have quality, capable receivers, somebody is going to get open. And if your quarterback stands back there with no worries and can throw the ball, you're probably going to be successful. So Indiana has to get to the quarterback. I don't expect to sack him all day and get to him all day, but they've got to put pressure there. They also have to cover the receivers. They can't sit back in a soft zone. They're going to probably have to play some man-to-man to get some respect on that side of the ball. And if they can show that and do that, then it'll be a much more tougher uphill fight.
Who's the best guy in their front 7? Who's been getting pressure? Who's been causing problems, not just in the defensive backfield, but up on the line or from a linebacker spot?
That's without question Aiden Fisher. He came over from James Madison as well, but he's going to end up being all Big Ten. This dude is just gets after it in every game. He has got his nose in everything. He can get to the quarterback. He can drop in coverage. He will make the tackles. He is without question the man in the middle on that defense.
Nebraska's got their own. Nebraska's got a guy named John Bullock, and John Bullock has been their unquestioned best player on defense, I think, at this point in the season. And he's the one who's making plays up front. He's getting back, picking passes off, batting balls down. So it's interesting. Nebraska's got their own weapon. IU's got theirs. It'll be a fight, I think, to see who can stop whichever quarterback, and that'll be the game. Jake says,
I think it's gonna be a fun one, no doubt.
Well, the way you're talking, I think a lot of people in the chat think that you're gonna predict a blowout for IU. I can't wait to get your score prediction.
No.
We'll do the score prediction at the end. I think you're just confident. You understand what IU brings to the table. The chat is excited though. I think the chat loves the back and forth, and they're really confident Nebraska's gonna win this game. I can tell based on what they're saying.
They have to be.
Yep, exactly. They're pumped up. They're ready to watch it. So, Jim,
wait till basketball comes around.
Yeah, I just tap out for basketball. I'm a Nebraska fan. I've learned I don't pay attention.
Not us, baby. We roll.
Yeah, one season I got to get excited about basketball. Well, maybe they can do it again. Okay, so Jake, thank you for being a member. Thank you for the $5 super chat. He says, Jim, have you heard of Death Row? Death Row is Nebraska's defensive line. That's their new nickname this
I was
season.
going to say, is it a record label?
Yeah, it's the defensive line. He says, how do you think IU will fare against the black shirts? So let's talk about how the defensive line stacks up against Nebraska, or the IU O line stacks up against Nebraska's defensive line, right? Nebraska's D line, it goes deep. They've got three guys on the front, and then they've got two guys behind. They've got they have Cam Lenhart and James Williams. So Nebraska goes deep up front. And they've got Riley Van Poppel in the center behind Nash Hutmaker. Like you said, IU doesn't have that depth, but their front line, do they have any NFL players like Nebraska has up on that front?
I don't know if they have any NFLers yet. That's the thing. Those are difference makers. But they sure have guys that they've played unbelievably solid, not spectacularly, if that makes sense. They have just played consistently all year, but there's no one that has 9 sacks on the year, 10 sacks on the year. It's not, but I think as a unit, they will do everything that they need to do to make life hell on Dylan Raiola.
All right, well, we're gonna find out. I have another question here that I don't fully agree with. Blue Penguin says, are the Huskers basically playing James Madison? And I think this is a variation of James Madison, but I don't think it's James Madison. I think they went and got
Only
so
13
many
players from James Madison came over. There's 85 scholarship
Yeah.
players on a team, people.
But in the starting lineup, I think there are like 7 or 8 guys from James Madison. To be fair, there are 7 or 8. And then if you go outside of those from James Madison, you've got 2 guys from Ohio. You have, I think, a couple from Wake Forest, 1 from North Carolina, 1 from Texas Tech. I mean, this isn't just a group of 5 team that transferred in and is playing in the Big Ten. They've got guys who've been successful at all levels.
And I think that the opposition should be happy as hell. They're playing against a bunch of mid-level guys. So everybody else has D1 players, man. In poor old Indiana, they just have those mid-level guys. I don't know how they're getting by, to be honest with you. It's shocking. But yeah, it's kind of funny that they're out there playing in this swirl, in this swimming in this pond with these teams that I think that they're going to continue to shock people. But until that happens, it sounds like just hyperbole.
Yep.
Along the way. And so I'm like, hey, whatever. I'm good with it.
Yep. I got it. Okay.
I've got my betting slip to cash that I made at the start of the year for the over on wins.
You knew. I took Nebraska over 7.5, so they need to win this game so I can cash that one. Okay.
Yeah, I've got one more win. I need one more win myself.
Well, Declan, thanks for being a member. He says, tell Jim Nebraska went undefeated against Indiana last year in basketball.
When was that?
Last season.
Oh yes, a season that is no longer being played.
Jim is moving forward. Declan, he's looking forward to a season where IU is ranked in the top 25.
And hey, I don't look at it from a fan standpoint. So I think Nebraska did a hell of a job.
They did.
The fact that Indiana allowed themselves to get to a point to where they lost to Nebraska is they should be ashamed of themselves. But but Nebraska did. They got their ass kicked. Tominaga kicked their ass every time. He was awesome.
He was on fire.
As a matter of fact, Brian Evans, the former great IU player, played with his dad.
I don't know who that is.
Tominaga's dad.
Oh, he played with Tominaga's dad?
Yeah, yes, in like overseas someplace.
Wow. Small world. Well, Willie said, thank you for the $2 super chat. He says, do IU fans have any fears they're overhyped?
No, because they're not overhyped.
No?
No. Well, no. They are what they are.
Yep. Well, I think this is where that question is coming from. Back in 2016, Nebraska had a really hot start. And I think it was Wisconsin.
Who was the coach then?
Bo Pelini. No, it was Mike Riley, 2016.
Oh, I thought it was Frost.
No, it was pre-Frost. It was the year before Riley got fired. And Nebraska started off 6-0. Then they had back-to-back losses, and they came back down to reality. I think they finished 8-4 or 9-3 that year. But they were ranked in the top 10 at one point. And Nebraska fans, even though the media was trying to sell them because the media needs to get clicks and the media wants to get you to watch the game, Nebraska fans knew deep down that they weren't a top 10 team. So I think that's where this question is coming from. IU fans feel like they have a legitimate top 15 team and they're not worried about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that they are, to be honest with you. They're better than people think. And
Yep.
it's like until you're up next to it, man, when you watch NASCAR on TV, you can't really tell how fast those cars are going.
Yeah.
But if you're at the track and you're right there, you're like, holy crap. It's just different, and it's going to be fun. I don't think that this is anything that is a given. Nothing is given. They have to, again, stay healthy. They can't turn the ball over. You can't do things that lose games and still win the game.
Yep.
So everything I'm saying is with the caveat of that. They can't just do stupid stuff. They have got to do what they've done all season. And if they don't, whether it's of their making or Nebraska's, they're going to lose.
That's fair. Well, I've got a question for you specific to players now, if we're good to go down that route.
Sure.
My sponsor is Prize Picks on our show. And on Prize Picks, you pick player lines. So I'm just going to read off some, and I want to know if you think they'll go for more or less. So Elijah Surratt at 62.5 receiving yards.
Oh, over.
Okay. Justice Ellison at 50.5 rushing yards.
Is he the leading rusher for Indiana?
He is. Second? He's leading by 80 yards over Lawton. Actually, he might have more carries and less yards. He might be the back that's behind Lawton. Lawton might be leading.
I'm going to go less on that because I do respect Nebraska's defensive line, and I know that they don't give up a lot of run yards.
Fair. Okay, how about Curtis Rourke at 255.5 pass yards? He's thrown for 380 and 359 in the last 2 weeks. So they're projecting him to drop over 100 yards. That's wild.
The most efficient quarterback in the country again.
Yeah, I'm surprised that number is so low. Okay, how about Miles Price at 29 receiving yards?
I'll go over. I mean, I don't know what that's just going to turn out to be the luck of the draw, whether he gets the targets or not.
At that point, I think it is. Well, how about Nebraska's key piece? I think this is kind of a lock to hit, in my opinion. Dylan Raiola, 225.5 passing yards.
Ooh, that's not. I thought you were going to say 250, so I was going to go under, but 225, I'll go over. Right. I wouldn't. Indiana's not good. I don't think they hold him to less than that.
I think especially if Indiana's winning the game, Nebraska's going to have to throw it. And if they have to throw it, I think he's going to hit. Rod, thank you for the $10.84 super chat. He says, tell Jim, thanks for coming on. Very knowledgeable and fun to listen to. It's going to be a great game, GBR. So
appreciate you guys.
Yeah, it's great to have a guest who knows what he's talking about. I'll tell you that. So I got 2 more things for you, then we're going to let you get out of here because I know it's late. So the line's at 6.5 right now. The total is at 50.5. Does that seem like a lot to you, or do you think that's a fair line? Because I watched Nebraska as a 9-point favorite against Illinois a couple of weeks back get beat outright.
Yeah, I am not a gambling expert by any stretch of the imagination, but it keeps cracking me up when I look at some of these lines, like I think it may have been the Northwestern game. They set the over and under at 41 or 2. And I'm like, do they not know that Indiana's averaging 42 points a game or 48 points a game? Do they think that they're going to go backwards and
right.
they're going to shut Northwestern out? But I think the 50 is definitely, I'm going to go over. I would take the over for sure in that because of what my score is when I tell you.
Yep. Well, let's get to that then. Let's jump to your score prediction. So I want to know your number one key for IU and your number one key for Nebraska if either is going to win the game.
Uh, for Nebraska to win the game, they're going to have just to have an unbelievable passing day from Dylan Raiola, and where he throws for probably close to 300 yards and 3 touchdowns. Because I don't think that Nebraska is going to run all over Indiana any more than I think Indiana is going to run all over Nebraska. But I think that Indiana's passing game, we'll get to that when we get to it. But that's what Nebraska would have to do, and I think they have to get Indiana to turn the ball over.
Okay. And for Indiana to win.
Do what they've been doing, and that is not making mistakes, not beating themselves, and just being machine-like. They have, I think it was the Northwestern game, they didn't score on the first 2 drives and then scored on 7 straight. It's what they do. It's what they have just, they get into this rhythm, and it's fun to watch, but you can't beat yourself. You can't turn the ball over. And that is, if Indiana does not turn the ball over, I cannot imagine them not winning the game. Not that it couldn't happen. Of course it could. I will always use the Vanderbilt and Alabama analogy for the rest of my life. So everything can happen. But I think that as long as they don't do that, then they're not going to lose the game.
Yeah, stupid mistakes, protect the ball, and IU should be good is your take. And I don't think they've had many stupid mistakes, and they have protected the ball really well so far. So going off recent history, it looks like IU is a machine like you're describing. So final score prediction. Mine was 20, I think it was 28-27 Nebraska. I can't remember exactly, but I think it was somewhere around there. What's your final score prediction?
I have my final score is 38-27.
All right. So we both think Nebraska gets close to that 28 number. I don't know that Nebraska can make the field goal. We'll have to see. It's yet to be proven. I don't know that Nebraska is going to be able to kick field goals to win this game, though, and that's why I'm not as concerned. In a lot of other spots, Nebraska has to kick field goals and take the points where they can, but against Indiana, who I think can score at will, I'm a bit more hesitant to say that field goals are going to win this one, so I'm not as concerned for that. They got to go for it, and they got to get into the end zone, in my opinion.
Yep, I agree with you, man. If you're going, I think any team, if they're going to beat Indiana, you're going to have to score points.
Yep. Well, Jim, I appreciate you coming on the show. It's been a great time. We were here for almost an hour, and I got a lot of my questions answered, so cannot wait. I am in California, so I'll be waking up bright and early to watch this one. I got to turn on Big Noon Kickoff, so I'll be up before 8 a.m. watching that, and then 9 a.m. kick for the IU game. It'll be great.
Yep, I will do it as well. I'll be doing the same out to the game, Hoosier Hysteria last night on Friday night. So it is a busy, busy week, and it's homecoming for Indiana. So it's a gigantic weekend on the IU campus.
This is going to be awesome, and I can't wait to see it. Are there any special uniforms or anything, or just wearing the standard red and white?
They're just, man, they're like Nebraska. It's pretty much, they're not as traditional as Nebraska, but pretty standard. No change in the helmets. I think they've been wearing the same red helmet with the white IU, the dark jersey, and the white pants. Nothing special.
Good deal. All right. Well, I will talk to you soon. Thank you for coming on.
You bet, Connor. Thank you anytime, brother.
All right. We'll see you. Guys, it was a great stream. Jim was awesome. Gave us a lot of insight. Tomorrow night, I'll be back for my Friday night predictions show. I'll give you my final thoughts on this game. Obviously, I'll give you our prize picks plays. I'll give you my bets of the week for all of the games in the Big Ten and the rest of the country. And then on Saturday afternoon, after Nebraska either has a fantastic win or a very disappointing outcome, I will be here to react to that or rant and be upset about it. Either way, I'll be here with you hanging out, and we'll get an hour in again. So back to back live streams. And I'm glad that we're back into the full swing of things. Ohio State next week, and yeah, we're off. Nebraska is still in the hunt for the Big Ten title. They're still in the hunt for the playoff. I mean, we can always hope. And I'm just glad that for the first time in a long time, we are able to have that hope at the midway point in the season. Doesn't it feel freaking good? Thank you, everybody, for coming. Thank you for the super chats. Thank you for dropping memberships in. Thank you for contributing to the show and asking great questions, because you guys are what makes this show so awesome and so fun to be a part of. But with all that said, thank you for being here, and I will see you in the next one. Go Big Red.